We'll be turning to the 12th chapter of the book of Romans. Romans chapter 12. We'll be continuing our study where we left off a week and a half ago in the book of Romans here in just a moment. Before we get into Romans chapter 12, we do want to remind ourselves of the outline we're following for the book of Romans, as we're in a transition period from the first section to the second section of Romans. And then we'll get into chapter 12 itself here in just a moment. The book of Romans, the outline that we have been following throughout, is divided down into two major sections. Section 1 is about justification by faith through grace, and that is the first 11 chapters of the book of Romans. The second section is the application section, or the living as a Christian section. Paul has in his writings, a lot of his writings divide down sort of into two main sections. One of those is sort of his argumentative section. It's where he's dealing with some issue. And then the second is often a section in which he is giving an application section. So, because this is true, you should do this. So, we finished up that first section, and we'll get into that second section here, that sort of practical section, if you will, here in just a moment. The first section, the first half of the book of Acts, the justification by faith through grace, the section we've been in so far, he argued in 1 through 3 about the need for justification. So, the Gentiles are sin, so they need the gospel. The Jews are sin, so they need the gospel. Thus, the Gentiles and Jews are sin, chapter 3, all sin and all need the gospel. Chapters 4 through 8, when the justification is available to all. So, chapter 4 through chapter 8, he talks about the fact that faith in chapter 4 is accounted as righteousness. And so, he talks about the fact that in chapter 4 that we're justified. Chapter 5, then, being that we're justified by faith, here are the blessings of that justification. Chapter 6, do not continue in sin. Those who have been justified do not need to continue in sin. They've died to. Chapter 7 is about the old law and sin. And then chapter 8 is there is therefore now no condemnation in Christ. So he talks there in chapter 8 about walking by the Spirit and not by the flesh. And how those who walk by the Spirit are children, and children then heirs. And heirs if we suffer. And then chapter 9 and chapter 11, Paul is dealing with the Jews' rejection of justification. We said that in the second subsection there, 4 through 8, that this justification is available to all, yet not all are saved. That means some had to reject it. And so that's what chapter 9 through 11 is about. It's about the fact that the Jews have rejected it. The justification is there available to them. Yet they have not attained it because they did not live by faith. So we point out in chapter 9 that the scriptures foretold of the rejection of the Jews and acceptance of Gentiles. He talked in chapter 11 about the fact that the Jews were the ones to blame, only Israel is to blame. And then he comes back in chapter 11 and points out they're not completely cast off. There is still hope for them if they are willing to change. So that's what the first 11 chapters do here. We're in the application section, living as a Christian. Particularly, 12 through 16, is living as a Christian in our relationships. So chapter 12, our relationship to one another is dealt with. Our relationship to our enemies is dealt with. It's dealt with a variety of relationships. And there are more in each of these chapters, obviously, than just what I'm mentioning here briefly, but this is just sort of a brief summary at the beginning of each one. The next chapter, chapter 13, is about our relationship to the government. In chapter 13, again, there's more than that, not to be indebted and so on and so forth, but chapter 13, the first part of that is about our relationship to the government. And then chapter 14 and 15 is the relationship between the brother that's strong and the brother that's weak. In that section, about not quarreling over opinions. The book that we'll get to here in a couple of weeks is chapter 14. An important chapter because it's an often misused and abused chapter. We'll talk about that some when we get there. And then chapter 16 is just sort of Paul's customary closing remarks. Greek so-and-so, some final exhortations in 16. So it's just closing remarks similar to how Paul does in a lot of plans. Let's get ready now for chapter 12. Chapter 12 is about our relationship, but it's a list of exhortations as well. So that's how we're going to remember it, is by three different categories of exhortations. Our exhortations to be a living sacrifice, an exhortation to humility and service, and exhortations about our relationships to everyone. Let's begin with that first exhortation, the exhortation to be a living sacrifice. Verse 1 and 2. I appeal to you therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. So he tells us in verse 1, first and foremost, you need to present yourself as a living sacrifice. Now, when you think of sacrifice, particularly in the Old Testament, what does it mean? What do you think of a sacrifice? What happens in a sacrifice?
Die.
Something dies. Well, the exhortation to us is we're to be a living sacrifice. Though we are living, there are some things that are to be dead. What's to be dead with us?
Sin, the world.
Sin, the world.
Greed, all the 7 deadly sins.
Yes, all those things as you go back, the works of the flesh in Galatians, the things in 1 Corinthians 6, the things going back to chapter 6, 7 in general. We're to die to sin, die to the flesh, and instead we are alive in God. Remember Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 through 10, is about being made alive, you who were dead in trespasses and sins. And he goes on to that long list, he made alive. So being a Christian requires some sacrifice. Now, not only is it the sense that we die to sin, we're dead to sin and to the flesh, but we're to sacrifice in the sense that there are some things, a sacrifice involves death, and it involves the giving up of something. And there are many things outside of sin there's things outside of sin that requires us to give up. What would it require outside of sin for us to give up?
Worldly pleasures that lead to sin.
Worldly pleasures that can lead to sin. I think in particular, what leads to those, Galatians chapter 2, Paul says, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. The life that I live in the flesh and live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. What Paul's saying is, I am a sacrifice. I've given up the desires of the flesh. Are there times there are things that are not inherently sinful that may conflict with the will of God?
Yes.
He talks about in Hebrews, they're laying aside every weight and every sin that's so easy to beset us. You've had a lesson or two on that, so we have to look at these things. We have to look at these things that are not inherently wrong in and of themselves, but if they keep me from assembling, then they're wrong. And you think about Paul wrote this, and then you look, Jesus came down to the Jewish people in one place, Matthew 23. He said, the scribes and the Pharisees, they said to Moses, see, therefore whatsoever they command you, that observe and do, but do not after their works. They lay heavy burdens on men's shoulders, but they won't move with one of their fingers. So the point is, Paul wrote this, but his life was totally consistent. No hypocrisy at all. If we think there is, read the book of Acts, read 2 Corinthians chapter 11. You can see. And he gave up a prominent place in Judaism. He gave up those things. But not only Paul. When you think about Jesus called Peter and Andrew, what did they do? They laid down their nets. Peter, Andrew, James, and John, they left their boat. They left their father. They presented their bodies as living sacrifices. Paul, of course, but not just Paul. And we look at these things. We want to be a New Testament Christian. I mentioned Wednesday night about the cost of discipleship. We didn't get baptized, and then if we want to go play a ball game or something, we'll miss the assembly, go play a ball game or something like that. Is that a living sacrifice? No.
You're right, and I think that's the thing as we go back to this idea of the living sacrifice. First of all, it's not a suggestion in Romans chapter 12 and verse 1, it's a command. Not, present your bodies as a living sacrifice is not a suggestion, it's something that must be done. But, as we go back and talk about those things, there are times where, again, going back to those weights, there's something not inherently sinful. Nothing wrong in and of itself. What was wrong with Peter and Andrew and James and John being fishermen? Nothing. But when called the disciples, they made the choice to become that sacrifice, to be a living sacrifice, to give those things up.
Dedicated.
Yes, they dedicated themselves in service to God. And so, this living sacrifice that we're called to be means that there has to be something given up. As we talked about that, we talked about the statement that David made at the end of 2 Samuel as well as in the 1 Chronicles, in which he's giving a sacrifice because of the sin of numbering people. And as he comes to the threshing floor of a man by the name of, I believe it's Runa, he, in that conversation, Runa says, I'll give you the threshing floor, I'll give you the wood, I'll give you the oxen. And David's reply is, I will not offer that to God, which costs me nothing. Sacrifice costs something. And so being a living sacrifice means there are things that have to be given up. And so what he tells us here is to be that living sacrifice. Though we may not be physically dead, instead we should be spiritually alive. We are those who are living, but are an example of sacrifice, like Paul, Peter, and the others.
Yeah, I think about a couple things. One thing, we talk about crucifying the old man, losing our life on saved. I mentioned that Wednesday night. So there's a sense where we crucify the old man of sin. Okay, but there's also a sense of Revelation 2:10, be thou faithful unto death, and I'll give you a crown of life. So we crucify the old man of sin, but in a literal sense, you know what I mean? Paul, another example. What do you mean weep and cry? Acts chapter 21, I'm not going to go into Jerusalem and be bound, but also to die for the cause of Christ. But also I'll say about this, because I know Paul is one example, but in Matthew chapter 19, after Jesus told the young man to sell what you have and give to the poor, then come and follow me. But Peter said in reply, see, we have left everything and followed you. What will we have? Jesus said to them, truly I say unto you, in the new world, when the Son of Man will sit on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, now verse 29, and everyone who has left houses, or brothers, or sisters, or father, or mother, or children, or lands, for my name's sake, will receive 100-fold and will inherit eternal life. So that's the point. There's the reassurance. There's the command, but there's the promise that goes along with the command. So like I said, Paul did this, and Peter did this. But today we say, well, we're a New Testament Christian, we got baptized. Well, you're going to know people by their fruit. So we're going to see. It's going to be obvious if I'm putting things in a certain God.
You're right, and along with that, and we'll talk about some things here later in our service, when we talk about our worship, that sometimes the focus is on our benefit. And we can understand there's benefits for God because there's the word of heaven. But the fact that God deserves our service, and sometimes we focus so much on here and now and the immediate benefits of things, that people turn away from being that sacrifice, not thinking about the fact that they're a sacrifice for God who sacrificed his Son. And that's what motivated people like Paul and Peter and others to be that sacrifice. As Paul said, the love of Christ compels or constrains us. And so then we become that sacrifice and give those things up. Verse 2 now. And he says, present yourself as a living sacrifice. Verse 2 really explains that part of that's going to involve. Do not be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God and what is good and acceptable and perfect. Here he tells them in verse 2 not to be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewal of their mind. We talked before about in passages like 1 Peter chapter 1, be holy. I think that's the theme of the first part of 1 Peter. I think one of the terms, I think there are certain terms we shy away from because of use in the religious world. One of those terms is the term saint. And one that is a saint is somebody that is sanctified or set apart. And so, what he's telling us in verse 2 is, part of being that living sacrifice, being pleasing to God. So, hold on for a second, go back. They've been justified by faith, right? They've obeyed the gospel. Now, you continue to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. But it wasn't a one-time thing they were done. They are already Christians. You present your bodies as a living sacrifice. You do not be conformed. It doesn't matter that at one point we were conformed and we were transformed, but we continue to be formed. We continue to be transformed by the renewal of our mind. This transforming, by the way, is from the word metamorpho. It's a form where we get the word metamorphosis. And so what he's telling them here is, you change forms. Change from what form? Well, from that worldly form, how people live, living for the flesh, to you continue by the renewing of your mind to be living in the Spirit. Going back to what we talked about in chapter 8. You do that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. And so what he tells them is, your focus is upon this right here. Like you're living by this right here, not living by the flesh. You don't do what everybody else does. Sometimes we compare ourselves. We talked about this before. We look at how we're doing by comparison. Am I better than the world? Well, those are on the news this afternoon. Let me tell you, you're setting about as low bar as you can set. If your goal is to just be better than society. But what it's expected to be is not just better than the world. We're transformed by the renewing of our mind. We're living by this. We're living not by the flesh, by the Spirit. Yes.
I think about this would be, the most obvious would be the contrast between those things of the flesh, Galatians 5, okay, and then those things of the Spirit, Galatians 5, okay. But also in this, I think about when Jesus started his earthly ministry there on the sermon we call the Sermon on the Mount. He sort of talked about transformation there. You have heard said this. You have heard this said. You have heard this said. And he actually gets into it and says, hey, you need to address these things at the level of the heart. And I'm not saying that God wasn't always concerned about the heart. I'm not saying that at all. But in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, he's like, hey, there needs to be a transformation even for you Jewish people from you have heard that have been said this, but now I say this. So, like I said, that contrast would be between like the works of the flesh and that, but it would also be that transformation of those things that was mentioned in the Sermon on the Mount.
You're right, and something, because you contrast the old and new wall a lot, when you talk about the mission of the heart, is a lot of the old wall, and being that schoolmaster, is a more physical showing of the difference between the people of God. And what I mean by that is, don't eat this, but instead you can eat this. Right? We don't have that anymore, that the outward showing that you eat this and not this, and you offer this sacrifice, you do this during this time frame, this during that. That was a more physical showing. But some, as you move through, we're doing physical acts. We'll talk about this even as we talk about worship, an outward act and not an inward change. We can go through the motions of acting like we're living what's right. That would be those that we describe, I believe the term in 2 Timothy is to have a form of righteousness. Those who, as is described in Luke, pretend to be righteous. That outward showing, but no inward change. And it requires both of those to be those who live pleasing to God, having the appearance of godliness, is what it says in 2 Timothy 3:5. And so there's that change in not being conformed and living and not just simply doing the actions, but having the right attitude and heart behind it. That's part of that renewal of the mind. It's not just an outward change, but it's an inward change as well. Here's an illustration. I think I've used this illustration before. Repentance is often defined as a change of heart followed by a change in actions. Can one change their actions and not change their heart? He says somebody has a problem with drinking, and they go to the doctor says you need to stop because it's damaging your health, and they quit. They don't think anything's wrong with it, but they quit. There's a change in action, but not necessarily a change in heart. Somebody may get caught in adultery, and they quit. They quit engaging in a relationship. Do they feel wrong? Do they feel they're wrong for it? Maybe not. But they change their action maybe because of a physical consequence and not focused on a change in attitude. And so both of those are required in that renewal of the mind.
And Micah, 2 Corinthians chapter 7 actually addresses that as where I'm going to go to heaven or hell. If I quit something because I got caught or whatever, because I've got some disease, that's a worldly repentance. Worldly repentance leads to death. But if I change because I have godly sorrow, that leads to salvation. So I just think about that. I was looking at that yesterday. That, like you said, not only did it change, but if it's not motivated by godly sorrow in the case of repentance, then I'm still going to heaven.
You're right. You're right. And there are some who do the right things for the wrong reasons. Somebody may obey the gospel, but they don't really obey the gospel. They don't really get baptized. They just get wet in baptistry because what somebody else told them, and maybe not for the right reasons. Let's try to get through today this exhortation, humility, and service. So that we're willing, we can do that second section, which is a lot of miscellaneous exhortations, and try to do that all Wednesday, be through this first part here. Let's read through it, and then we'll go back to discussion. For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function, so we, though many, are one body in Christ, and individually members of one another. Having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. In prophecy, in proportion to our faith. In service, in our serving. The one who teaches, in his teaching. The one who exhorts, in his exhortation. The one who contributes, in generosity. The one who leads with zeal. The one who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness. So first in verse 3, he says, don't think too highly of yourselves. The ESV says, not to think more highly of yourself. Let me pull it up here. The New King James in the same text says, and not to think more highly of himself as well. So the idea here, and I'm thinking more highly, is that not exalting himself and thinking more of himself than the other. Now, there's a second aspect of this we're going to talk about in a minute. Because I think we ought to stop with the first part, but not thinking too highly. We get to the second half of it. But the first is not to think too highly. So the idea here is that there's some, and by the way, this problem in 3 through 8, if you want to read more information on how a problem like this arises in churches go into detail, I think it's a very similar point he's making to 3 chapters in 1 Corinthians 12, 13, 14, where some of them will be coming up. So let's use that illustration of 1 Corinthians. There are a variety of spiritual gifts. Let me pull up the list here for you. 1 Corinthians. There's a variety of spiritual gifts given to 1 Corinthians, and they each were serving a different purpose. Some of them were for the believers, some of them were for the unbelievers. Try to point out those chapters, and we'll not go through all of that. We're willing, I think we'll go to 1 Corinthians after this, so that sometime later we can go through that in detail. But beginning in verse 4, 1 Corinthians 12, now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are varieties of service, but the same Lord. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God, who empowers them all and everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. For to one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, to another the utterance of knowledge, according to the same Spirit. To another faith by the same Spirit. To another gifts of healing by one Spirit. To another the work of miracles. To another prophecy. To another the ability to distinguish between spirits. To another various kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. All these are empowered by one and the same Spirit, who apportions to each one individually as he wills. And so, as you go through those chapters in detail, there's people that are saying, well, listen, I have a better gift than you have. And someone said, well, I have tongues and you have prophecy. My gift is better than yours. What were they doing? They were thinking,
More high of yourself than they ought to.
More highly than something else. That's the opposite of the attitude given in Philippians chapter 2, where he talks about having the mind of Christ. Look not only on your own interest, but also
On the interest of others.
on the interest of others. And so they were exalted to something thinking too highly. He goes through here after mentioning this, and says, but the thing with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. There are 2 extremes in how we think. In a lot of things in life, we're talking about this for really a few minutes in our worship. There are sometimes we take 2 extremes in a lot of things in life. And we either go to one extreme, which is people are thinking,
More highly yourself.
more highly, and then there's the other extreme where sometimes people are thinking too,
No worthiness to us.
yeah, they're thinking too lowly, no worthiness. And the idea here, and the idea of humility as a whole, and the idea of having a sober judgment, is having an honest evaluation of oneself. So, when they look at themselves, and they go through the rest of this here, they're all members of one body, and they all have varying gifts. Okay, we go through the list there. Let's just use the illustration for a moment here, the ones we use today. Song leading, praying, waiting on the table, those are Bible class teachers, those are encouragers, so on and so forth. Those are all part of one body. Sometimes somebody may look down on themselves as not being able to do something they in reality are able to do. And instead of being an honest self-evaluation, sometimes we, in an effort to be humble, swing all the way to the other direction, and to make sure we don't think too highly, we began to think too lowly. I've known people that when you talk to them, you would think they were absolutely worth nothing, and that's not true. They have something to provide, but instead of being on this side, they swung all the way to the other direction. We've got to be honest in that evaluation. That's hard. Sometimes, by the way, the harder part is not coming down from thinking too highly, but coming up from thinking too lowly and trying to be honest in that evaluation. Now, and coming back to the point earlier, everybody has varying gifts. Instead of putting down their gifts or ability, be honest in their evaluation and realize that in the end we are all members of
The same body.
the same body. Is every man going to be a song leader? Is every man going to be a preacher? Is every man going to teach a Bible class? Is every woman going to teach a kids class? No. But is there a role for everybody to fill? Yes. And what we have to realize is, as we sometimes sing the song, we are one. We've said that a few times from the supplemental, that I may not be able to fill the role, but then you can fill that role, and all of us working together is for the good and the edification of the body.
It's never a competition. We can let it become that. Luke 17:10 says, after I've done all that I'm planning to do, call myself an unprofitable servant. So I think that addresses the attitude I should have. Big deal if I can serve in 5 different capacities and somebody else can't. I just want to do whatever I can in service to God. If the Son of God Himself said, hey, if you want to be great in the kingdom, you serve others, He washed the feet of even Judas or whatever. There's the attitude there. And then we don't look, we shouldn't look at somebody else and say, well, look here, I'm doing fine. That's not the point. It's like, collectively, what can we do to build each other in the body of Christ?
You're right, and Paul in 1 Corinthians 12, again, going back to that illustration where he does some of this in, I think, more detail. You go to 1 Corinthians 12, you use the illustration of the physical body. Your ears, your eyes, your nose, your hands, your feet, they all have different functions. Are there certain parts of the body we use more often than others? Yeah. Hands, feet, so. But the parts that may not be used as often, does that make them any less important? No. And when all of that is functioning together, our physical body is functioning at its highest capacity. And the spiritual body is every part providing what it can. And when every part is providing what it can, each role will be fulfilled, and the body is building itself up.
Paul posed a question to the church of Corinth. He said, what do you have? You haven't received. In other words, it's not about us. If God gives us the ability, we should humbly be thankful that use of His service, but we receive it from God. I think we need to thank that.
Absolutely. You're right. We're going to pick up in verse 9 and deal with those miscellaneous exhortations all Wednesday.